Hello, lovely learners. Welcome back to A Life Learned. So today was supposed to be when I was going to share my experience speaking at a parole hearing, but basically like every other time that I have gone to vlog about something involving this case, something else happened instead. So, as many of you know, I live in London, Ontario, and the um, penitentiary or institution that he's staying at is near Kingston, and so I had to drive all the way to that institution in order to be at his parole hearing. So that meant 4.5 hours of driving. I have a lot of homework, so I really didn't want to stay overnight, so that meant that I drove there and back in one day. A lot of driving. I was very sore. I'm still working on recovering. So that meant that I had to get up at 3:30 in the morning, and I was borrowing my parents' car, which was kind of helpful instead of having to deal with a rental, but still very stressful. I was driving from, I don't know, I guess from 3 straight till 7 was like always dark, and the glare was terrible because it was raining. It was just very unpleasant experience, and then driving for that long is really hard on the Achilles tendon, and my back, and particularly my arms, which is where most of my pain is with my fibro, so it wasn't fun, we'll just say that. But you know, driving experience. So got there right on time, I want to say maybe 10 minutes early. Wasn't sure where I was going, parked in the wrong spot, went to the wrong institution because they've got like 2 different institutions on the same property. Walked over to the right institution, and then Shane came with me because we're still good friends, and he's just been there the whole time, and so he said he'd be a support, and that was really helpful. So I got him to go get the car and move the car because we would have had to walk like 15 minutes to get to it from the new building that I went to. It was just a kerfuffle. So I get into the new building and I have to sign in or something, and I'm kind of confused, and then a person comes up who is the person I've been coordinating with in the Corrections Canada parole system, and she helps me sign in, and I'm just like, it was about, I was doing okay, surprisingly okay, because usually I'm shut down within days before, but I was doing quite fine up until about 10 minutes before we got there, and then things just started to freak out. I was just like very irritable, my heart was racing, and I could feel myself starting to shake, and it's just not good. And then, so once I'd finally got into the building and started interacting with her, I was just like really shut down. And so she was like trying to do small talk with me, and she's really nice, but I was just not in the state for it. So it's just like, I'm really sorry, but I'm not in the state to be social right now. I don't mean to be rude. And she's just like, no, that's fine. And then I asked her some questions about, you know, how the parole hearing was going to go and if it was going to be like what I experienced before, and basically the answer was no. Like, for final submissions, I had to deal with the lawyer that he had defending him arguing against a whole bunch of things that I'd said in my impact statement and how they were invalid, and I shouldn't have said them, and blah blah blah, which was invalidating and unpleasant. So I asked her if that was going to happen again, and she said no. He didn't even have a lawyer. He had some kind of legal assistant or something, some kind of assistant helping him. But nothing about my statement is going to be like picked apart. It's just about him answering to the parole board, because they'll have questions outlined to get clarification on whether they, like, depending on what he says to those questions, will decide if they feel he's eligible. What he was applying for was both day parole and full parole. What I learned was that the way it works is that they have a higher chance of getting it if they have support from their parole officer, and his parole officer supported day parole, but not full parole. The difference being that day parole, he has to stay in a halfway house, and I believe full parole, he would go into his own home or a friend's home kind of thing. So in Canada, they really try to structure the system to be restorative, and with that they believe in gradual release, as she was explaining to me, to try and increase the chances that they will not reoffend, that they won't spiral and just get worse, because it seems to be recognized that there is a lot of mental health things around people committing crime, and if you just throw them back into society, it's not exactly going to turn out well for the majority, because transition, like, it's just a very different experience, obviously, being incarcerated versus being in society. So if you just get thrown into it, shock. Anyways, yeah, it can be bad for the psyche. So she's saying how they're in support of, this gradual release idea. So we waited around because, if you maybe recall, if you have been following along, there was another victim, another witness that was able to participate in the case because I am his second victim. The first victim was much younger when she got hurt very severely by him, and had gotten in touch with me just through Googling his name, funny enough. And because she had been a past victim, she was allowed to register for the case as a victim and write her own impact statement. And so I was kind of excited to meet her. The whole situation was awful, but that was like a positive for me, because she seemed very strong, and there was this comfort in having someone there who knew what I'd been through, I guess, as awful as that is. But she didn't show up. Unfortunately, she didn't get notice about the date until like 2 days before, apparently, so she wasn't able to arrange a ride to get out there. So we just, we ended up going from, after waiting for a while, we went from the first building of like registry or whatever over to another building, up to a second floor, and then sat in a room that was roasting. It was so hot. And just sat around. We had like a guard with us or whatever, because we weren't allowed to be by ourselves anywhere. And then I suggested eventually, that's when we exchanged and she shared a lot of this information with me, and then I suggested possibly looking to see if the first victim had sent an email, because she still hadn't showed up, and we were hoping that she would. So the person I was working with out of the Corrections Canada got up to go look at that email, and we just kind of sat around twiddling our thumbs. And then when she came back in, I wasn't even really paying that much attention, but she sat down and she says, "Bad news." And I'm like, oh, this has two folds to it. And I was like, so she's not coming, the other victim, the other witness, and she's just like, well, no, unfortunately she's not. She wasn't able to find arrangements, but I have other bad news. I was just like, oh, why am I not surprised? And so she said, he has decided to postpone. And I just want to, like, side note right now how ridiculous it is that they can postpone up to like seconds before the actual parole hearing. Stupid. The whole system is designed with the perpetrator in mind, because it's a restorative system, so it's designed to give them as much chances as possible to be in a good position to be reintegrated into society. So it gives them as many chances as they want to postpone an appeal, or not appeal, sorry, a parole hearing, if they want. I'm feeling so frustrated now, reflecting on having gone through all of it, because I drove up that 4.5 hours, from 3 a.m., got there around 8, because, took a break, because, driving for 4.5 hours is quite painful, and it was all for nothing. So, but at the same time, this is just what he does, right? I'll leave a link somewhere in the description and maybe in the little tabs to link back to some other vlogs where I've discussed further detail for anyone who's new to this. But this is just what he does. He postpones things. He waits until the last minute and then postpones things. And you wouldn't think he'd do it in something where it's in his favor, that being him getting parole, but in this particular case, he screwed up. He screwed up so bad. And it was about the only way that I could have possibly felt good about the whole situation, because it was so frustrating to have gone that far. And I was exhausted. But I came to learn that I'm not sure of the exact reasons, but this is my prediction. Apparently he freaked out about something to do with the witnesses, and I really think it was the first victim. Like, he didn't expect her to get involved with our case. Excuse me. So he apparently freaked out when he saw something to do with the witnesses and or victims, however you want to term it. They do victim/witness in all of their paperwork. But anyway, he went and called his friend, to whom I knew exactly who it was, and told him to call the parole board or the Corrections Canada, whoever it was, and tell them that he, the perpetrator, my abuser, didn't want the victims being allowed to come to his parole hearing in person. Fucking hilarious. So first things first, he has no right to request something like that, because we have every right to be there as people who specifically the crimes were committed against. Like, there's just absolutely no right of his could possibly trump that we're allowed to be there, because we just are. So that's dumb. But yeah, I don't know where he was thinking. Like, I don't know, because he's been playing sick a lot. He's in a wheelchair apparently, so I'm thinking maybe they've been tiptoeing around him in terms of his disabilities. And so I'm not usually one to say that about someone with disabilities, but this man is such a fucking actor. Excuse my French. Anyway, so oh, it's just all so frustrating. And now I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, so what they determined through him making this call to his friend and his friend making this call to the corrections, making this request, that he's ultimately, violated his conditions before they've even been put in place. Because some of his conditions are that he is not allowed to speak with me or the other victim, or have any direct or indirect contact with us or any of our family. And so the idea that his friend called Corrections Canada to ask that we not be allowed to come would require, if it were to happen, Corrections Canada to contact us to say that we should not come, which is through the grapevine indirect contact. So, yeah. Basically, he shot himself in the foot really hard, because he knew what his conditions were. He'd already reviewed it. And so to violate it before he's even had the parole hearing it just looks real bad on him. Real bad. And validates all kinds of stuff that I said in my statement about him being manipulative as hell and just trying to work the system to his advantage. So I had myself a good evil laugh of just like, oh yeah, you screwed yourself. Yes. Yes. Awesome. Check on my side. Yeah, it was definitely good news after being told you just drove 4.5 hours for nothing. And there's a very good chance that it's going to be rescheduled at a point that I won't be able to actually be there in person again, because I'll be busy with school or exams or something. So, yeah, the only reason I was really able to go this time is because it happened during my reading week. Lucky me. But yeah, so it was just such a fiasco, once again, of getting all the way there and it being postponed. but he screwed himself hard. And what this meant was that his parole officer withdrew all support for even day parole. So now he has no support for any type of parole from his parole officer. And I don't know how he's going to finagle to change that. So if all goes well, then he might not get parole at all, and he won't be released till next June. But who knows? I don't know. The system constantly seems to have surprises. So knowing when he really will be released, they've tentatively rescheduled the parole hearing for December. So we'll see. But excuse me. In the meantime, he has put himself at a serious disadvantage, and I could not be more delighted about it. Simply for the fact that I was describing that he's done stuff like this constantly, and I was afraid that they would assume just because I'm a victim of his that I would have a negative warp to my impression of him, which would be reasonable to assume, but I think I've been very neutral in assessing him. I'm no longer blinded by loving him, and I'm no longer also like blinded by hating him. He's just a person who is really messed up. And in that way, I wrote my statement to be like, these are the ways that he has definitely acted to demonstrate that he's manipulative and he's harmful, and you need to be cautious of that. So his actions now are like documented within their paperwork and validate what I've already said. So pretty happy about that. But I guess I'm going to be posting another video at some point, maybe in December, because they might give me a chance to do it by video conference or something. We'll see. Maybe I'll be posting another one where I actually talk about speaking at a parole hearing. But for now, yet another postponement. Yippee. In the meantime, I hope you're doing well, at least better than I am. If you have experienced a parole hearing, or if you've had postponements like this involving the Canada Corrections, please feel free to share below as always, and do join me again next week or sometime soon where I try again to share a little something I've learned or experienced in life.